A while ago, I was browsing John Butler Games, and I realized that I hadn't made a new game in, well, forever. I wanted something simple to make but fun to play because I have a trend of having lots of great, unfinished ideas. I browsed the internet and found that 2048 looked like a very simple game that would be fun to play and easy to make. After playing Unicorn 2048 for 2 hours, I got to work. I set up the gameplay system, and as you can see, it works perfectly, exactly how I intended it to be. Like any good program, it's generating about 1 error per second. As you could probably tell, I didn't really have a plan for how to make the game work, so this is when I started thinking about one. I realized that when you make a move in 2048, each row completes the move individually. There aren't any pieces that move diagonally. This means that I could isolate each row and use the same code to compute the logic for each one. So now I only have to deal with the logic of moving a single row, which is a much smaller challenge to deal with. The first thing that happens when you make a move is that all of the pieces move to the right as much as possible. I set up this part of the logic, and it seemed to work fine. The next thing that happens is that all of the pieces that are adjacent and have the same value combine together. This part took a little more work, but eventually I got it right. Now you might be thinking, John, this only works for moving to the right. If you were thinking this, then you're correct. That's why I'm changing the title of this video to Making 2048, but you can only move right. Actually, I've changed my mind. This is the worst game I've ever played, and I need to do something about this. So, I just had an amazing idea. When you make a move that isn't right, I can just flip the board and pretend you did move right. That way, instead of writing code for all 4 possible moves and every one of the 4 rows, I can just write one singular piece of code. Now, at this point the game is playable, but it's really hard to tell what's going on because all the pieces look the same. Also, once the numbers start to get bigger, you can't even tell what the pieces are. It sort of reminds me of the old periodic table, where down at the bottom you don't even know what's going on. I made a quick adjustment to the font size, and already it's feeling a lot more playable. The next thing I was going to do was add a color scheme, but then I thought, who would want a color scheme when every piece could just be a picture of me? Now, even though this is undoubtedly the best game I've ever made at this point, I decided to give it a real color scheme anyways. Now, none of the pieces are confusingly the same color, and it's actually starting to get fun to play. Tired of having blocky blocks? Now your blocks are rounded. Oh, also the bigger ones have a cool border. And maybe some of them should glow. Okay, that's way too much. Let's do a little less than that. Compared to the original, that looks quite nice. It still feels like it's missing something though. Oh right, mine doesn't have any animation. Now, when you're making a game, it's important to build the base layer first and put everything else on top. Unfortunately for me, when I first started making this game, I did not anticipate having animation, which is one of the base layers. And when you try to cram something fundamental into your program at the last second, it tends to crash to the ground. When I tried to add animation to my game, it somehow broke so much that pieces started escaping the edges of the 2048 universe and venturing out into the unknown. Now, although I admire them for their adventurous spirit, I really don't want them to be there, so after a lot of debugging, I finally got the edges to become solid once again. Except now this happens. Now, believe it or not, I did finally manage to get the animation working correctly, but it just feels really rough, and I want it to be smooth. Luckily, I found a cool math thing called the sigmoid function, which basically takes a really rough animation and makes it smooth. I also added a little popping effect when a piece spawns and combines, and along with the smoothed out animation, playing my game now feels a lot more dynamic. I could be finished now, but I want my game to be better than all those 2048 clones out there. One thing that I noticed is that when you get a big piece, there isn't any recognition for it. It just gives you the same old animation or a boring windscreen. When I make it to 2048, I want to get the animation that I deserve. After spending a large portion of my life debugging, I was finally able to make progressively cooler animations as you get bigger and bigger pieces. Now that the gameplay was set up, I just needed to add a few finishing touches, a score counter, a game over menu, and a title screen with a wide variety of buttons, including the play button and nothing else. Now that my game is complete, it's time for me to try and beat it. After definitely not cheating because I lost at my own game, I was finally able to make it to 2048 and beat it. If you want to play this game for yourself, the link is in the description. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.